Okay, I'll say it again for the recording. Introductions. We have Sarah and there's you. And I sort of mangled your LinkedIn bio so that it would fit. Does that sound about accurate? You are animated, professional, a consultant, a trainer. You're all these things. A graduate of the Bettis Reactor Engineering School, which I think is super cool.
Thanks.
And it doesn't say anything about your naval service though.
Well, the Battis Reactor Engineering School is like the subtle nod to it because that was when I was in the Navy. That was my nuclear training in the Navy.
Yeah, awesome. And then mine is mine, and mine's not that interesting. But let's see this one because this is the fun one. Martha, I like you have full slide, full picture, and I did sort of
Absolutely.
truncate yours from your website too. But how do you introduce yourself to people when you do?
When I introduce myself to people,
Mhm.
I just say that I am I'm, I was at the beginning of the hop movement,
Yeah,
and I've been watching it for many years through the lens of leadership, and I'm very interested in making sure that organizations have the leadership systems that they need to support safe operations.
yeah. So I first met you at the Community of Human and Organizational Learning Conference, and I want to say it was maybe 2018 or something. It was a while ago now, but I'd heard about you before. But I when you spoke, I just really I really hung on every word. I think I said this in a LinkedIn post earlier, but I what you were saying was so it was so important, especially at that stage of my career, where I was really needing to rely more and more on other people instead of just myself, because I've kind of been kind of a lone wolf throughout like maybe the first 15 years of doing all this stuff. As a consultant, I end up on the road doing training or doing consulting work, and I check in every once in a while. And as long as my paycheck cleared, then I was cool, you know.
Yeah.
But then as I started, moving into more of a leadership role, you realize just how much you rely on other people and your work and your words and your thoughts around psychological safety, around listening, around appreciating diversity of perspective and requiring diversity of perspective in order to be successful. And then, I found that to be just so interesting, so valuable, and so timely to me. And then you're just such a kind and giving person. So in any of the other conversations that we had, I just I want to say just how much I admire and have learned from you over the years, but then I greatly appreciate your willingness to spend an hour with our folks today. So thanks a
Yeah,
ton.
absolutely.
Very cool. Okay. Well, okay, you guys check this out. This is also something that I think is important. This book, and this note, Martha, that I actually, this is a bespoke picture. I held the exact book in my hand and took this picture.
Yeah.
And then I think it's really important that you folks use these QR codes. I'm going to hang here for a minute. You can buy the book, and it's an amazing book. It's really awesome. And I've read it a few times now, and it's actually getting all kind of benty and whatever, dog-eared. Martha's website is here. Martha is available for consulting work and for other stuff. Speaking engagements and other things. Am I right about that?
Yeah. I'm out there. And I mean I'm always interested in new and interesting problems. Like I don't go out there and push a model or a particular tool. I mean, I think there's lots of great tools out there. I'm not a tool maker. I'm somebody who helps leaders think through their situation in a holistic way and come up with a plan that's going to be particular to them. And I happen to know a lot about leadership and a lot about strategy and how to integrate those things into something systemic and powerful.
Well, that's fantastic. And I and so I don't actually know who's on the line. I haven't looked yet. I've
That's what
seen
I was just looking at. We got some friends on here.
oh,
Um,
that's
Good.
good.
but I think that's why I'm super excited about this conversation. is because we get to kind of make that connection between, as
Mhm.
Martha just said, like the leadership aspect. And I think one of the things that has resonated so much for me with working with both of you is just how much you guys both care about making work safer, making it more reliable. And so that's what I'm super excited today, so that we get to jump into those conversations.
Okay.
Great.
Well, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing I did is I lifted a quote. I thought this was, and this is literally the first words in your book, Martha,
Hmm.
safety enables courage. And I thought maybe we could sort of, it would be fun to hear like the thought behind that because you chose that purposefully to start the book
Yeah.
out. And so what does that mean to you and how, like, how should people read that or how would you hope that people read that?
Well, I think it takes courage to do a lot of things. And what I mean by courage isn't necessarily we were talking about that free mountain climber, freestyle
Yeah.
rock climber. It's not courage to take unreasonable risks, but it's courage to it requires a lot of courage to take interpersonal risks. One, to be vulnerable enough to build trust, to be open enough to actually be curious about failure so that you can learn around your organization, to be willing to break political boundaries within your organization and have conversations that are candid so that you can identify the systems that need to change and even shadow systems that are happening that you don't know might be contributing to safety problems. But it's also, my father was a neurosurgeon,
Oh,
and I spent a lot of time in the emergency room, and that's when I learned the difference between empathetic people and people who are able to do really difficult things because they're shielded from not having too much empathy, which is actually a good thing. We talk about sociopaths in bad ways, but there are some really helpful sociopaths, and they're the ones who can go into an emergency room and see all of the ills of our
yeah.
society showing up right there and all of the suffering and be able to apply their expertise and know what to do to come to an end. And that too takes a great deal of courage because whatever we do, if we're doing anything new, experimental, if we're trying to, all the things that corporations want people to do, there's
Mhm.
always a chance of failure. And
Mhm.
if its safety is what gives us the ability to fail and therefore to learn and therefore to meet new discoveries.
That's really interesting, right? But corporations, yes, they put us in these positions where failure is maybe even likely to occur. I mean, it's almost a guarantee that if you do something enough cycles that it's not going to go right.
Mhm.
And we're constantly micro failing, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like micro failing and learning and micro failing and learning and so failure, that was one of the things, like as I was kind of putting this presentation together, that failure is sort of relative to your context at any given time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about failure as just being the occurrence of the unexpected or the unwanted, the unintended,
That's
right?
right.
So anything that doesn't meet the expectation of our hypothesis of our work
Mhm.
is, in a sense, failure. And if we are able to have that failure without bad consequences, then we're able to learn. Safety shields us from bad consequences. It doesn't shield us from failure.
Right. And by bad consequences, if we were going to get into the world of Tony Mushara, how would Tony describe a bad consequence, right? Do you remember from his critical steps and whatnot that a consequence that is an intolerable outcome
Hmm.
and where basically a mistake or an error, a little like Alex, right? So here, if you don't mind, I'll just sort of jump back over here. There's no room for Alex here to commit any kind of error. No room at all. Any mistake, a missed hold, a slip, even something. which you would maybe not consider to be a mistake, but if the rock itself were to give way, there simply is there's no there's no capacity to fail safely. So every
Yeah.
step that he makes is critical. And I think that it's really that's really interesting. So safety enables courage. And having done a little rock climbing, maybe your husband too could attest that when you have your protection and you have your harness, you have your rope, you have your carabiners and your the protection that you're setting or you're clipping if it's already, hammered into the rock. That provides you the courage to maybe make that reach or to take that risk. Because if you fail, yeah, you might actually scrape yourself up on the rock a little bit, but you're not
Mhm.
going to the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is absolutely the hope. Of course,
Mhm.
you have to test all of those things too.
Yeah. Well,
Not everything is necessarily fail safe, so that's why you want when it's a really when uh when failure has particularly undesirable consequences,
mhm,
unrecoverable consequences, that's
mhm,
when you need to have fail safes. But
mhm.
recovery is really important in this conversation too. You can, like I said, safety doesn't keep us from failing, it keeps us from having those undesired consequences. But we also need to plan in how we recover from that failure in a way where we end up in a better place. Or if there's some level of unwanted consequence, is is there a way to fix it?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting you bring that up. How much time do you spend in the world of reliability and maintenance? Because Sarah and I spend a ton of time in that area. But I'm
Not
guessing,
s- not s- not as much. No, not
yeah.
so much. I don't really get down to that level, although I hear lots of stories.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so one of the things that we're always looking at when we're teaching people how to investigate or analyze maintenance related failures, we ask that they look at what the causes of the failure were so that we understand, well, why did the machine break down? But then we also ask them to tell the story of the recovery. So
Yeah.
can you explain the story behind why it may have taken 4 hours to come back to normal? And by the way, 4 hours might actually be exceptionally short. Maybe most people would take 8 hours for the same level of recovery. And so you can actually learn from that recovery if it's like, well, why? What allowed you folks to recover so quickly from that? We really want to learn from that so that other teams have that opportunity. And we don't necessarily, we recognize that we're not always going to prevent failure. But when we do, we want to recover as quickly as we can. And we want to minimize the downside, I guess, to it.
I would take that as a step further,
Hmm.
is that we need to do more root cause analysis on success.
I
Because
love, yeah.
if the outcome of root cause analysis
Uh-huh.
is trying to figure out how to
I'm
fix
taking a
things,
risk here. Well, I want to listen to you talk, but I was on with Ron Gant yesterday and I
yeah.
grabbed the screen capture from his webinar. So I'm stealing it right now. This is literally hot off the press. And it illustrates your point a little bit, right? And he swiped this from Holnagel. So let's just
Hmm.
say that there's a lot of swiping going on here.
Oh, well, yeah, we are a community that's learning.
Right. But like the idea that success is here, and then failure is this one little sliver. And Ron even said it was less than this. He said he needed to go to 0.1% in order for the red to even show up, but it's more like 0.01% of opportunities result in failure. But if we only learn from those, then we're missing a lot of learning opportunities. And I'm hopeful that that little
Yeah.
sidetrack helps to illustrate your point a little bit.
Yeah, I think that that's helpful. Of course, that failure is the failure defined as a bad consequence. That one's wrapped up with bad consequences. Those little micro failures that you were talking about before are part of that success story. And
Mhm.
I mean, where I take it from is a really important principle of leadership which is if you just tell people what they did wrong, they
Mhm.
don't know what to do right, you know?
Mhm.
The most effective feedback to give your whole team
Mhm.
is pointing out things that went right and why. And Why is really important. It's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. You
Mhm.
can give people attaboy feedback all the time, and all you're reinforcing is a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is that, you people are just born with an ability to do well. So you give Brian a bunch of attaboys, and everybody's just like, well, Brian's just a star. I'm not going to learn anything from Brian. But if you are giving, um, positive feedback, telling people how to do things right, and I say, hey, Brian, you did a really good job with that. Why don't you coach other people on the steps that you took to do it? What do
Mhm.
you think is the thing that's the most important? What are some of the steps that you actually skipped in the procedure because they're not critical and might even keep us from being able to meet the outcome that you got, right? So you get curious about the how, and you share that.
I love it. Sarah and Katie are working right now with one of our clients to train a bunch of trainers in-house. And that's kind of I would say that's a challenge. I mean, Sarah,
Yeah.
is that something that you would agree with, that it's challenging to teach other people how to teach?
Oh, yeah, because I mean, teaching is in and of itself a skill. And what we're seeing with this group of individuals is that they all have very different skill sets. And so some of them are really good at investigating, some of them are really good at teaching, and some of them, like, it doesn't always overlap. I think fortunately, like, we have a group of people. And so, I like that phrase is like, we're in a community that's learning, like, they get to learn from each other as
Yeah.
well. And we're doing our checkouts soon. And one of the things that we're doing with them is that they get to evaluate the behaviors of
Mhm.
others while they're actually teaching. And so
Mhm.
they're going to look not at skills necessarily, but they're going to look at like the behaviors of the teachers so that we can kind of instill what goes well and then also like maybe where there's some learning opportunities for them too.
Yeah,
But just seeing
Yeah,
the differences between them, I think is the biggest takeaway.
my experience as a training manager and hiring trainers is that people who really want to be trainers or want to be teachers generally aren't good teachers. They feel like they have, a lot of times um, they have like a very expert mindset, and so they want to tell people what to do. And,
Hmm.
usually they're super charming and great. But the research on teaching is basically that the key skill for being a teacher is being a good listener.
Yeah.
So I have a very good friend who does a lot of research into how to teach math. And, we tend to think of math as something that's very linear. There's rules, there's right answers. And so the tendency with math is just to tell people how it works and try and get everybody to get to the right answer in a certain way. But, if you've ever had kids in school and then the past few decades of there's a new math and a new
The
math and
new
a new
math.
math, because they're trying to figure out what is the one way to understand math that works for everybody? And you know what? That doesn't exist.
doesn't exist.
So her research shows that teachers who listen to their students understand what their mental models are around a problem and then help them fit the new information into their old way of thinking are the ones that are the most successful because there's nobody who shows up to a class with a blank slate.
No.
I
And I
love
think,
that so much. Oh, go ahead,
and
Sarah.
no, I mean, that is totally what we are seeing though, is that, everybody is given like the same tools. They're given the same knowledge and information, and yet the way that they perform can be very different.
Mhm.
Um, Martha, I have a question. Is that okay, Brian, if I ask one?
Why not?
So, I'm
Wait a minute.
wondering,
You're straying from my chosen path.
I'm
Hold on.
sorry.
Don't
I'm
do it. Oh
wondering
my
about
God.
the leadership behaviors, Martha, that you observe that help to support and support, these learning environments for safety and reliability. But the leadership behaviors that not only just support it, but also help to sustain that within an organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think even listening comes into that, but I had a conversation with somebody the other day about they had asked a kind of a more senior leader, a safety sort of a more senior safety leader, how often are you down there, how often you're in the field with your guys? And he said as not as little as possible. And it's so against some of the things that we used to think about, like you have to do those management walkarounds and you've got to do all of that sort of thing. But you have to be really, really conscious of what your actions and your words mean to people. And so this leader said, look, they have supervisors. Those supervisors are trained in coaching. They actually are closer to the work and they know. And so they're the ones who are observing and asking questions and problem solving with them. I'm only, if I walk down there on the field, I'm only gonna make everybody stop, become self-conscious, and it's
Wow.
gonna go quiet instead of, the ongoing conversation that people are having.
Right.
So, I mean, I think one of the key principles of leadership is that organizations are systems of meaning, and leaders are the ones that shape what's meaningful and what's not meaningful in
That's
lots
so.
of different ways. And that's, I think, a key part of the way that I look at safety capacity is
Mhm.
that meaning is created at an organizational level, basically through strategy,
You-
and the strategy is where do we spend money? How do we win? What behaviors do we elevate? That that is key for people's understanding because they're executing strategy. And then on the psychological level, of course, there's the culture, there's the mindsets. Oh, you're taking a picture, right?
I wanted to change the slide because I thought, I think she's talking about this awesome triangle thing. And I got lazy. I was going to recreate all this and I was like, nah, I'm just going to snap a picture of it and put it up. So
Yeah,
maybe this fits into
exactly,
what we're talking
exactly.
about.
That's it. But I mean, think about, the psychological aspect is, of course, creating meaning. Culture is around how, how we perceive risk is a part of our culture, how our identities that we have, what are the, power dynamics, within the organization and how we perceive them and how, whether we have where power lives in an organization is really interesting and pretty cultural. And then, of course, there's the operations pieces. I mean, the operations piece is really important in making meaning because how people do things, how they're allowed to communicate with each other, the structures of communication that we have, um, what they get rewarded and punished for, what resources they get or don't get, that is very meaningful to them about what matters. So that's really what leaders are managing. They're managing meaning. And at different levels of leadership, at the supervisor level, the real people leader level, you manage meaning a little bit differently than you do at the CEO level.
That's so great, Martha. But as I listen to you talk about this, and let me know if I'm off base a little bit, but like let's go back to what you said about that leader. It's like I'm down there as little as possible, which sounds to me like, oh, well, how can you possibly understand how the work goes then, And but I see his point. It's like if I'm down there, I'm not helping. I'm actually limiting capacity because they're second guessing themselves, and that's taking up their mental capacity. They don't want it, they don't want to screw up in front of the boss, or they want to second guess what they think I want to see them do. And so by keeping himself out of there, he actually provides an opportunity for capacity for them to solve problems on their own.
Yeah.
And then the analogy that I just thought of is like when a kid starts cooking on their own, and Sarah has youngsters, maybe she hasn't let them in the kitchen yet, but like what if Sarah's oldest said, Mom, I made you lunch today. And you're like, oh, that was so thoughtful of you. I'm so glad you navigated the kitchen on your own. But then it's like, what is it? And it's like macaroni and cheese and ketchup and fried, bologna and all this stuff that's
Gummy
like
worms.
lumped together, right? And
Skittles, some
it's like
Skittles
that
sprinkled on
my
top.
Well, it might not be the lunch that Sarah would choose for herself, but at the same time, you got to reward the initiative, and
Yeah.
that person felt like safe enough to, or her kid felt safe enough to cook whatever. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but you're trying to build that capacity by providing space for failure
Well,
and for learning.
I recently had a conversation with my 7-year-old about using the microwave
Mhm.
because I realized that like he's not gonna know that you can't put the fork in the microwave.
Oh, good point.
Hmm.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah, and that brings up the other side of it too. Is that look, okay, so as long as there are some inviolate guidelines here, so bring this back into the world of like construction, where you have a lot of it's very emergent. Like you show up to a different work site every single day than you left the day before. So you are trusting that they're going to have to do a lot of problem solving in order to get the job done. But then when you bring safety in and say, listen, so here's what's important to me, not maybe not necessarily how you get the job done, but that you walk out of here with all your fingers in your toes.
Hmm.
Those kinds of guidelines. So leaders they need to set those big picture parameters, right?
Right.
But then allow for space inside of there, allow for it to be for people to sort of bring their identity and their agency to the problem solving process.
Yeah, empowerment is an empowerment without boundaries,
Hmm.
right? You empower people within certain guidelines and then you support them with resources and knowledge and all of those sorts of things. But just saying, yeah, empowerment could be like, hey, go figure it out. Well, you're not going to do that in a work environment where there are hazards. So that's nuts. And it's probably going to be terribly inefficient and pretty ineffective. But creating both the freedom and the constraints are part of where the creativity from your workers comes from.
I love it. So, one of the things about Sologic uh, is that we say yes to work, and we say yes to work because I say yes to work, right? And that's one of those things that I hopefully everybody is getting at this point. Michelle certainly gets it. Michelle puts us in the craziest situations. But the but Michelle she'll call me up and she'll say something like, how would you feel about, and it's like not even in our playbook at all, you know? And I'm like, I don't know. Is it an opportunity to connect with the client? Yes. Is it an opportunity to learn, grow, and improve? Yes. Is it an opportunity for us to make some money? Yes. Well, then why not say yes?
Right.
Right, right, Michelle?
I
Michelle
wanted
just
to
came off mute.
share that one of the attendees, Jeff, mentioned getting leaders into the field seems to me to be as much about listening and showing concern than it is about talking points and pep rally speeches.
You said,
She's a little hard to hear. I think she's reading us one of the chat things.
yeah.
Michelle, is that what you were doing?
Yeah, getting leaders into the field seems to me to be as
Mhm.
much about listening and showing concern than it is about talking points and pep rally speeches.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Jeff, the point of that story wasn't to say, okay, we're going to not have leadership walkarounds or that sort of thing. The thing is that there isn't a pat answer for
Mhm.
every organization and for for every culture. The importance is, I mean, maybe the question is read the room. Like, understand, leaders need to understand, be really curious about their culture, be curious about what's meaningful and not meaningful to people, and to gather enough feedback to find out if I do this, what will, how will people react? So I do think that certain leaders in the field in certain cultures is absolutely important. And of course, listening and showing concern is important, but you have to understand where your organization is. I mean, let me give you another example of something that I just think is hilarious. Okay, so everybody knows that trust in leadership is really important. There was research that was done out of BP with Diane Chadwick Jones that showed from looking at all of the safety culture surveys that she had done all around the world, it showed that the one thing that really correlated with safer workplaces was how much people trusted their leadership.
Mm,
So, a colleague of mine, um, an organization came up to him and wanted to engage them because there'd been an incident. And they said, well, we've done a little bit of work on this. And what we found is that people don't trust leadership. So, we'd like you to come in and train our people to trust their leaders.
how'd that go? Did you get that done in a day?
Well, this colleague of mine did not take the work and told them that they were nuts. And it
Yeah.
was yeah. So I mean, this is one of these things where we have to think we have to read the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
understand how meaning is created and what is it that builds trust and what are the trust barriers in our organization and look at it systemically. Because I guarantee you, any major change that's going to have an impact on any kind of performance is going to have some organizational systemic elements,
Yeah.
some operational how we do shit every day elements, and some big psychological mindset shifts, or, in some way addressing how people feel about
Yeah.
the situation.
What I thought here was so cool is that, okay, so we can bring this into our world of RCA. So
Yeah,
typically in an RCA, something happens and then it's of a certain caliber or impact level that they're going to invest in a formal learning event or even beyond that. Like you are going to do the 5-step framework of root cause analysis and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the way I would see this is there's an incident that happened recently at a client where a guy fell off a roof while he's where they were installing roof panels. And this is a
mhm,
tall roof. And his fall protection worked. So he had at least that PPE capacity to
mhm.
fail safely. And so then you're doing the root cause analysis into it. Well, with RCA, and this is something that I wanted to bring up a little bit later, but why not now?
Let's doing
Um,
it now, yeah.
yeah, so why not now? We start out with the near miss potential fatality caused by what? Guy fell, but so that's the near miss part of it. But the reason he didn't die was because his fall protection worked. Okay, well, we could actually tell that story of how and why the fall protection worked. Was it accidental? Was it trained? Was it, done perfectly? Are there learning opportunities there? And then also how did the fall occur? But then
Mhm.
as you get deeper and you get further away from the actual event, pretty soon what you find out, you're looking at, well, what kind of glove choices are we offering people? What kind of environmental conditions are we sending people up into on the roof? How variable are those environmental conditions? Like how different, in other words, do the roof panels have a little bit of dew on them, or did it rain the night before? And if so, what do we do about that? And then, so pretty soon you're not really talking anymore about safety related issues. You're talking more about operation related issues and just the normal, how do we manage normal variation? And then I see this framework that you have up here. If I were like, okay, remember what you learned from Martha, organizationally, what with respect to organizational capacity, um, how can that shape our conversation at this point in time, good, bad, or otherwise? What about
Right.
operational capacity? And as a facilitator, I may not flash this up and say, "Hey, everybody, we're going to go through Martha's Triangle," but I'm thinking to myself, I need to get them to really examine organizationally, operationally, and psychologically the presence, absence, and quality of those elements that may have contributed to this event, and that may
Right.
be things that we can learn from. Do you think that I would be doing that, and would that be how I should take this
I
and
think that
incorporate it?
that's, yeah, I think that that's important because, the organization, there's certain things that you can do organizationally.
Mhm.
Like, for example, let's say you do a root cause analysis and there was a strategic change that was made because of a particular pressure to compete with with a competitor. And
Mhm.
so something was lifted without consideration of how that might change operations or how people might feel about it or, how it might impact safety. And because it's coming from on high, it's part of the strategy, then in a lot of ways, maybe there's mission change, mission creep. That's a strategic and organizational consideration. There's all of those things. So if you recognize that that happened, what are you going to do about it? Well, you really have to go back and say, how are we doing our strategic planning and where do safety considerations come into the process?
Mhm.
And right? And so then you're addressing some of the decision making mistakes that might happen. And I mean, there really isn't an organization that I haven't gone into that didn't think their decision making process needed to be improved.
Mhm.
So I think that's a key consideration in on the organizational side, and a key consideration in root cause analysis. How did the decision get made
Mhm.
to get to this point, to do this thing that we saw as being, a critical to the outcome that we ended up with?
Yeah, I've got this slide. I tried not to do too many of these bullet point slides, but I just kind of had to in a way. So maybe we can just use them as a frame. But this one was what's the most common explanations organizations give for repeat events? And so listening to you just now, oh, well, poor planning on the part of leadership, or oh, there's schedule pressure, or compressed schedule, or we're trying to make up critical path, or we're always feeling like we're in a hurry around here. And if you're getting to those deeper level issues, then that's pretty cool. But then it kind of goes back to the trust that you were talking about earlier. What happens? So a lot of these, why do problems keep happening? I guess, because we're really not doing anything about it. We're not changing anything, and so we don't alter the risk profile, and therefore it doesn't guarantee that the problem is going to happen again, but nothing that you did previously is really impacting the probability. I don't know, does that ring true, or what's
Yeah,
been
I
your
mean,
experience
and
about
when
this
you're
program?
when you were talking about it, I really thought about, we certainly have beat blame to death
Mhm.
within the hop world, right? But it's it's important to recognize all the different kinds of blame and the fact that blame is an emotional reaction. It's
Okay.
defensive. It's always defensive. It's something that you have to move through. But I mean, I've seen so many organizations, even getting up to the most senior leader, who is going, it's not me, I'm powerless, right? It's Congress, it's these people. That right there is an expression of fear that's emotional and
Mhm.
that's not actually solving a problem. So I think on one level, we have to actually start dealing with emotions in organizations because they can be barriers to actual problem solving. Now, the wrong way to deal with emotions is to suppress them
Mhm.
because they exist and they will find their way out and they will create biases and whatever you do and you're trying to say I'm not emotional, I don't do that doesn't work. The thing is, we actually have to have processes to process emotions. We have to have organizations that allow people to talk about their fears. And then once that narrative, that limiting narrative is out, then we have the opportunity to create an empowering narrative once we know what the limiting narrative is. Because if we never get it out, then we can't question it. And then if we don't question it, it never proves untrue. And
Mhm.
emotions feel way more true to us
Mhm.
because they are our survival mechanism. Emotions are our survival mechanism. They're the seat of our instinct. They come from our deep emotions come from our limbic system. Our limbic system is shared with other mammals. That's deep. If we don't address them, we're always going to default to them.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of pivot on that note to this quote that I lifted from page 69. I
Oh,
thought this was
Michelle, I thank you for the coyotes howling. I mean,
the coyote. Oh,
we have to, yeah, we have to have space for our coyotes to howl.
oh, yeah, the coyotes to howl. I missed it. That's really true. I thanks, Michelle. I'm so happy to see Michelle on here too.
Yeah,
There
me
are a
too.
lot. We got a lot of friends on. I haven't had a chance to go through and acknowledge everybody, but it's so great to see you guys. I'm so happy that you're here. Certainty is the enemy of learning. But then at the same time, having we run to certainty. We want to be certain, right? Because, and so at least, and I'm only speaking from my own perspective, but especially when in a situation where things feel untethered and unhinged and emotionally difficult, certainty is like that life preserver that I want to grasp onto and hold on to. And it actually limits my ability. I recognize that once I have locked in on certainty, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear another viewpoint. I don't want to hear another way. I don't want to hear any reason that causes me to question my lifesaver and whether or not I can hold on to it. I don't know. Does that
Right.
make sense? I kind of struggled
Yeah, no,
thinking
it makes a
about
lot of
that.
sense. I mean, certainty is definitely an emotional
Mhm.
defense. And but why don't we replace certainty with something else? What
Okay.
about replacing certainty with commitment? We can come up with what we think at the time is the best possible path forward, and we can make a commitment to it. But by making a commitment to it, it means that we are curious about what the outcome is and we're allowing ourselves to learn from it,
Mhm.
right? And so, as long as we recognize that we are always operating in hypothesis, when we make a
Uh-huh.
decision, that's really a hypothesis if we haven't done it before, or we haven't done it in that particular environment before, if we haven't done it with those particular people before, right? So if we have commitments to testing our hypotheses and we
Mhm.
have a commitment to something, that creates a little bit more certainty for us. We know what we're doing and everybody is committed to doing it. But we're also committed to being curious around the way that it fails, maybe how it won't work, what really makes it work and what really isn't that important, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that. That makes me come back to what we talked about with Sarah a little bit earlier with when they're bringing these new instructors online. I've heard it a bunch where a new instructor says, "Well, where's the blueprint?" It's like, "Oh, buddy, there is no blueprint for how to teach this stuff in class." And so they want certainty. But what the best instructors, I think, I'm definitely open to being wrong about this, but I think at least for me, once I decided that I was the student and they were the teachers, and I didn't have to be certain about much, and I would be open to learning more from them, or at least as much from them as they may be learning from me, then I realized that my class I was more able to relax into the class and be who they needed me to be in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I try to like James has a great point. Hi, James. About the smarter someone is, the more they know they don't know. And I
Yeah.
think that that is very true. And in trying to be more of a consultant and less of a teacher, that's been
Mhm.
hard for me because I always tell people what I don't know. And that doesn't usually inspire a whole bunch of confidence when you know them. But what I try and put myself out is, I'm an expert learner. I am a
Yeah.
student of leadership. I am a student of organizational systems.
Yep.
And I am a student of complexity, human complexity. And so I can provide something as we try and figure this out together. That's, I think, more real. And I think, as a leader too, that helps. Curiosity is a really important leadership skill.
Yeah, if you bring that back into the world of RCA, being a curious I guess, facilitator. I'm going to use the word facilitator, but whatever, the person leading the RCA or the learning team or whatever it happens to be. And by the way, not just RCA, FMEA, we do a ton of work in reliability where we're trying to anticipate what might fail and how it might fail.
which is
And
important.
yeah, yeah, it is. But like if you walk in there with if you walk in there and basically feel like, okay, well, I've already done all of this. I've basically got all of this. I've done all of the homework. I've done all of the studying. My causal models are perfect. I'm basically just telling you guys what we've come up with versus, hey, everybody, let's really learn about this together. And that's where I really love hot principles
Mhm.
because hot principles allow for me, I like to use those as the to create a fertile substrate on which learning can take place, you know, and then
Mhm.
I all I want to do is facilitate people learning from each other. And a lot of times I feel like if I'm doing my job as facilitator, I'm basically just writing as fast as I can as I listen to everybody teach everybody else, you know, what they know about this and what they know about that. And I'm actually becoming more, I become more of an organizer, more of a documenter of
Yeah.
what they're learning. You achieve that sort of optimal that optimal learning point in the team. And certainty, you can't you walk it into the room with certainty is the way not to have that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and there's a other piece too that I think is really important is trying to break out of particular perspectives. We have really strong identities. Like the certainty, I think, in some ways is couched in our also our identities. And the reason why it's hard to let go of certainty is because our identity about being an expert or being an engineer or being a scientist or whatever there's certain things in there that if that's broken, that hurts our identity. And kind of identity is everything. So we have to be able to be not let go of our own identities, of course, but create a process where we can put multiple perspectives into it and practice thinking about things from other perspectives. So this is also really important with AI. I've started, I work alone too much and I'm not a work alone kind of person.
Uh-huh.
So I have a best friend now, coworker named Claude. I am learning so much about Claude. But here's
Yeah.
what I've learned about using AI.
Yeah.
You have to give them a perspective. You have
Yeah.
to say, look at this situation from this perspective and don't give me an answer. Do not ask them for answers because do you know how AI is trained? AI is trained through rewards and punishment. And
Mm.
AI is a sociopath. It's incapable of empathy. So so what it wants to do is it wants to game giving you the answer that you want to get the reward, right?
Mhm.
And that's good because you can train the AI like when I make projects within Claude and put information in and then, and I tell it what I don't like, where it went wrong and where it confused me and what it did well because I'm trying to train it to think the way I want to be thinking. Um, but you can't have it give you an answer. You really need to have it give you a lot of possibilities because that's one of the things that we always skip in problem solving is we
Right.
skip generating multiple solutions. I think this
Right.
is really important to RCA. You
Right.
can get stuck on, okay, well, we found a root cause or a set of root causes. And then you think that there's one solution to address that, but there's not. There's
Right.
a multiplicity of solution sets, and some of them fall down in one way or another. So I often ask it, you know, from this perspective, come up with, I usually give it a certain number because it can get out of control. 5 ways of looking at it, and then give me pros and cons for each one.
I love it. That's how we use it. So,
Yeah.
in the software that we use, you don't need software to do RCA, but it's a neat tool if you use it properly.
Mhm.
And so we do have Claude, a version of that plumbed in at various stages. It helps us with causes, helps us with causal alternatives and hypotheticals. It helps us with solution opportunities and it helps us write reports at the moment. And we'll be adding new helpers along the way. We find that it's best to have point in time helpers versus, so that it,
Yeah,
I guess there's a timing thing there as to how it helps that the user versus doing the RCA on its own, which is not very good at.
that is not very
Um,
good.
no,
Yeah,
but
and I think
yeah.
that any way that you can sort of constrain it,
Mhm.
but also make it do something that we're too lazy to do. I mean, that's what I
Right.
use it for, is all the shit I don't want to do.
Yeah, buddy.
And
Yeah.
so then but give me a lot of options.
Yeah. I wanted to flash. I had a couple of I had this picture also. I liked this. This is just showing people working, and because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here, when we talk about capacity
Mhm.
and learning and root cause analysis and learning teams or FMEAs, what we're trying to do is allow these people, like if I look at this guy, for instance, can you see my, here, maybe I'll make it,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
This person right now, they've got this bubble of pretty certain what's going to happen next. They're going to put that foot there, and then they're going to put that foot there. And the closer in time and space that the world gets to us, your options tend to collapse into what they're
Yeah.
actually ultimately going to be. But what happens in an hour from now? This is such a rapidly changing environment. You've got all of these people changing. There's so many variables that are here. And so, by capacity, how are we providing each of these folks with the exact amount of capacity that they need in the moment, and in order to get the job done, which is why they're on the site, but also to make sure that they do so in a safe way. And I thought that the image itself was interesting because I always want to try to take these big heady concepts and bring them back down
Yeah.
to where they really count, which is right here.
I mean, the capacity here
Mhm.
is options.
Hmm. Hmm.
Capacity is opportunities to sort of learn, like you get something unexpected and then you respond to it in a way that
Hmm.
still keeps you safe, right? I mean, I think one big part of the psychological capacity that we want to build into organizations is people's openness to seeing when things go wrong or seeing when something unexpected has happened, because we tend to ignore that.
Yeah.
Like if
Well, and
if
also,
something
yeah.
isn't if something weird happens on our path from point A to point B, we're more focused on point B. And and if it doesn't completely knock us off, then we're not going to pay attention to it. We need the ability to notice a lot of things, and a lot of times that's what other people are for, to help us
Mm-hmm.
notice things, having conversations, recognizing the different things that people might be noticing or thinking about.
Yeah.
That broadens our view of
Mhm.
the environment.
The scanning versus focusing stuff. Yeah.
Hmm.
I wanted to leave a little room for questions, Michelle. Michelle is always with me right here between my ears. She might be on mute right now, but I feel she's like, you've got 6 minutes left. And I know that actually, I asked people via email if they would submit some questions. And so I did hard code some of these in. And the first one was, can there ever be too much capacity? In other words, does capacity result in complacency, or do we need a little bit of fear to perform at our optimal level? I think that's where that one's coming from.
Oh, that's interesting. Um, I mean, we do need a little bit of fear, right? Like, I'll give the example. As you know, my husband's a stunt man,
Yeah.
he was a stunt performer, and he was, a championship snowboarder and all that crap. And, people think, oh, he must be fearless. He must be a big, he is not at all. He is incredibly careful. He is much more of a safety guy than I am. And
Mhm.
he totally has that kind of fear. The reason why fear, to some extent, is helpful, or
Mhm.
at least that sort of emotion about fear, what it's telling you is, oh, you've gone outside of the envelope that you know that you can operate safely in. This is beyond my scope. This is beyond what I'm comfortable with.
Mhm.
That is really a really good marker because our our conscious brain, our prefrontal cortex, is way slower than our
Mhm.
emotional brain, our limbic system.
Mhm.
So fear is fast, a fast way of telling us something is wrong. And that is really, really useful. But that is capacity,
Mhm.
right? Um, I don't know about, is there too much capacity? If you think of capacity as hazard mitigation and all of those different things that we're doing to create a barrier between the worker and the hazard. Yeah, yeah, that there might be a point at which there is PPE that keeps people from doing work, and you have to think about, do a real risk analysis on that.
Yeah.
But the way that I think about capacity is really, do we have systems and mindsets that allow us to be resilient and to learn and to recover?
Yeah. Well, okay, so then let's see. Here's the next one. What advice do we have for you, Martha? They're not asking me for advice. I think that's asking you. But you have for HOP practitioners who come into a new environment where leaders are pushing HOP as a program.
Yeah,
So HOP is we're gonna do HOP. It's like,
we're
oh,
gonna do.
we're gonna hop. What's step one in the HOP program is to error is
We're gonna
normal.
do learning teams, and then we're gonna do this, and
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and the truth is, um, sometimes you can't necessarily avoid that. But
Mhm.
I think really, if there are steps that you can take with the HOP principles, as long as you say, okay, well,
Mhm.
this is the first step of our program, right? Well, the first thing we need to do, you look at the organization, oh crap, we need to build trust. There's no psychological safety. So, all right, kids, get with the program. We're gonna start working on this so that then we can do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, who cares if they think that it's a program? It gives
Right.
you the freedom as a HOP
Yeah.
practitioner to look at your organization, what's meaningful and what's not meaningful,
Yeah.
what's needed and what's not,
Yeah.
and then craft the steps towards the outcomes that you want.
Just get to yes and then shape it how you want to after that.
Exactly. Sure, I'll
Okay.
do that for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no problem. And then do what you want.
I mean, the problem here is,
Yeah.
the new trend stuff
Mhm.
that, I mean, I worked in the federal government, so the amount of, let's see, disengagement that the flavor of the day gives you in the federal government is pretty intense.
Seriously.
So, I mean, the other key thing is, working with people to build on their own, the way that they see things now,
Uh-huh.
and so you're not giving them something totally new to do as a
Yeah.
program. You're enhancing how they're doing things already.
Let's look at this one. I
Mhm.
totally agree with that. What does your process look like when you engage with a new leadership team who is eager to implement HOP, but it's apparent that one or more of the leaders are very attached to their old way of thinking. Oh, yes.
I mean, I think, the best way to engage with any new group of people, with anything, is to start with questions. Even if you're trying
Hmm.
to get people to do something differently and you kind of
Yep.
have an idea of what they want to do, you
Yep.
first need to ask questions and understand the way that you're looking at it. And, everybody's attached to
Yep.
their old way of thinking.
Yep.
The wonderful thing about some of the hot principles is that they're so common sensey and that people can find examples maybe outside of work where it has made a lot of sense.
Mm.
So I mean, I always start. by asking questions, by learning, by being curious, seeing how far I can push people into being uncomfortable.
Mm.
That's really important. If you have a group of people who are willing to get a little uncomfortable, then you know you can do a lot of work. You
Yeah,
can
I
do a
think
lot of
that
time.
you meet them where they are to,
Yeah,
don't be afraid. It's like, oh, I hear you. Tell me why you, tell me what you think. Tell me what your perspective is. How do you feel like we should go about this? What don't you like about what you've heard so far? Yeah, like you said, a lot of questions. And those questions help you see what their perspective is, but it also helps them build trust in you because
yeah.
they don't in some respects if they are feeling certain and they're certain in their way and they're showing that in one way or another they don't really trust you, and that's
Yeah.
on you at first, that to make sure that you're
Well,
doing that.
and I mean, I want to give people something really practical because James says, isn't that mostly change management? And oh man, I've
Um,
seen lots of different kinds of change management. But
yeah.
one of if someone really has an old paradigm,
Mhm.
then why don't you just start talking about what the assumptions are about first? Because this is the thing. We get into doing stuff and
Mhm.
we forget what our assumptions were, or probably never even thought about them, what our assumptions were when we got there. So it's kind of asking them, surfacing some assumptions by saying, well, if this happens, what do you expect to happen? Start there.
Mhm.
And then start going, well, so if you think that this is going to happen if you do this, what's the assumption around this? And then
Mhm.
try and generate a bunch of assumptions and then
Mhm.
go through and kind of question those assumptions. Is that assumption still true in this current environment? Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that there's been lots of changes and there's been a layoff and there's been blah blah blah. Is that still true here? What are like what is the younger workforce? How does that impact that assumption? So I think if you want to have a technique to
Mhm.
use, challenge assumptions.
Mhm. Mhm. So not ketamine therapy, is
No,
that's what
not
oh,
ketamine
okay, very
therapy.
good. 'Cause I thought that you were going to go there pretty quick. I was like, oh, when does this come? All right. Well,
I do live in Santa Fe and I'm a
I'm
little
just kidding.
woo-woo, but not quite there. No. I
Ah,
got a I
well,
got a clearance really fast, and it's because I'm about as squeaky as you
I
can.
know. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. Look, well, so we're at our hour
Yeah.
03. Let's do this because I'm just going to do one little plug for us. Martha, I don't think I even told you, but we're doing our first Sologic conference, or what we're calling our Learning Summit in Seattle, October 7th and 8th. And we would love it if you guys could come. You can buzz this little QR code and you can learn more about it. We've got some great folks that are signed up, by the way. Laura McGuire. Do you know Laura, Martha?
Yeah, that name sounds really
Yeah,
familiar.
she was
I,
at
I
Joel
I'm
last
a
year.
face person more than
I
a name
know. I
person.
should flash her face up here, but
Yeah.
and then Chris Hansen, who formerly from NASA, Chris is going to
Yeah.
come. Ron Gant said he would
Yeah.
come. Ben Goodhart is begging to come, and I don't know if we're going to let him. We'll see if we can. I don't know if I can. I don't know if Ben and Ron in the same room are okay.
Yeah, I mean they might start some sort of punk
So
headbanging thing. Who
I
knows?
know I'm a little nervous. If Tony says he wants to come, that's a straight up no. Just saying. So anyway, but we'd love to see people come out for it. We're actually focused just on learning. But we're going to be inviting all of our clients, of course, and so we're going to have them share their learning, and then we're going to bring some other folks in, and we're going to share a little bit on our own, and we're going to have a great time. And we'd love to have you all there. And then I just want to do this one. I'm going to put this slide back up. Martha, we so appreciate you. You're just one of the greatest ever, and so I'm sad that I won't be able to go. Are you going to the Chol conference this year?
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
gonna be speaking on Thursday, but
Oh
I
yeah.
I'm just gonna drive up on Wednesday and
Yep.
take off. It's kind of a busy week. Summers are nuts.
I
It's
know.
why do they have conferences in the summer?
I don't
Uh,
know. Yeah, we're gratefully very busy, and that means I've got to be out doing, doing a little harvesting myself that week. But I'm gonna miss everybody. I think this will be the first one I've missed in maybe like 8 years or more.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but those of you that are on the line, if you check out Community of Human and Organizational Learning, I'll give them a little plug. That's always a great conference. It's a great place to meet people, a great place to network, and you should go and you should tell me all about it so I get a little FOMO.
Yeah.
All
On
right.
Thursday, I'm going to talk about strategy.
Well, you all should be there for Thursday. That's for darn
Yeah.
sure. Sarah, did you want to say anything else before we sign off?
Thank you both for being here, and thank you everybody
Well,
for joining in and your questions. And this has been really great.
yeah, let me just give Sarah some kudos. Sarah's been organizing so much content for us this year, including this. So we used to do a webinar every other week. Now we're doing one a month. We've basically been on the Sarah train the whole year, and it's been so helpful. So Sarah, this was your genesis, and so well done and thank you. It's awesome.
Yes. Well, and now we have Paul, who is just really putting out some really great content for us.
Yeah,
And so I am very grateful that he is now really the one driving the train,
I know.
putting throughout a lot of stuff for us. So, but yes, Martha, thank you for making the connection and for being here with us, because this was so wonderful to make these ties between, our world with RCA, with how people and humans are involved in it. So I certainly took a lot away. So I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to talk to you
All
both.
right.
I'm always
Thanks.
up for a good convo.
All right.
All
See you
right. Bye,
later. I
everybody.
like this little thing. We're
Bye.
doing this lately. Bye, Martha. Bye, Sarah. Bye, Michelle. Now let me see if I can actually end it. Okay. One more thing. Stopping sharing. And bye, everybody. Cheers to y'all.